In a sane world, this would be a pretty easy lawsuit. Once the vaccine for COVID-19 was widely available, Boston College issued a policy requiring that everyone that worked for them get vaccinated, because otherwise you would be killing people, which would be, among other things, a huge pain in the ass, right? So they did offer a few exemptions to the policy. Some people can't take certain vaccines for medical reasons, and that's reasonable. Some people also refuse to take vaccines for religious reasons, and that's not, but Boston College had exemptions in their policy for both. You just had to bring a note from your doctor or your faith leader explaining why you needed to be exempt. Now, as I'm sure you'll recall, getting a faith leader to write a letter exempting you from the vaccine was about as hard as finding a hot take on the latest Star Wars property. But when Evgeny Rogach, a Boston College landscaper and devout bogomil, demanded an exemption, he didn't submit one of those letters. Perhaps that was because his tiny 11th century offshoot of Christianity of a faith doesn't actually have any policies about vaccinations. Perhaps it was because it's hard to find a religious leader when your faith has like 26 adherents and most of them are in Bulgaria. But for whatever reason, he didn't submit the proper paperwork and he was fired. So he sued for wrongful termination, claiming religious discrimination. So in response, Boston College moved to dismiss the lawsuit because obviously they had a policy for religious exemptions. This guy didn't go through that. He also added a bunch of weird shit to his lawyerless lawsuit about how he's an ethnobotanist and Boston College's policies violate his medical practice. It's exactly the kind of lawsuit that reminds us why we have dismissals. But along the way, he used the magic word. When he was scrolling his idiotic objections with his feces-covered crayon, he included the word religious, so the judge is allowing it to go to trial. Because even though Boston College did provide for religious exemptions, they didn't bend over backwards for one and offer exemptions even to the exemptions and endanger the lives of their employees and students and ignore science and common sense for one goddamn stupid fucking objection. And damn it, those are the rules now. You have to do that. As soon as a person says sincerely held religious belief, all of jurisprudence and legal precedent needs to get the fuck out of the way for a minute. And at this point, again, if we were in a sane world or even a sane adjacent world, Boston College's defense on this would be, well, we didn't want people to die of COVID, and the judge would say, yeppers, and he'd bang his little hammer and they'd move on to another case. But you can't even see sanity from where we are. So instead, Boston College's argument seems to be that accommodating Agage's sincerely held religious beliefs would violate their sincerely held religious beliefs. For reals, because BC, that's a Catholic college. And in December of 2020, 4 months before they instituted their vaccine policy, the Vatican released a statement calling on Catholics to get the vaccine as soon as it became available. This was said to be part of their religious duty to, quote, protect one's own health and, quote, preserve the common good, end quote. So they're basically fighting cooties with cooties in this lawsuit. And where does this leave the courts? Right? They're basically left adjudicating, I got you, no, I got you. They're going to put on suits and say fancy words and sprinkle in some Latin phrases or whatever, but make no mistake, that's what they're doing, because sincerely held religious belief could only ever be a farce, a fucking mockery of the very concept of equal justice and reality for that matter, and it was only a matter of time before one imagination was going to have to fight another imagination with a courtroom looking on. And as bad as this is actually the good form of this, because I don't doubt in this instance that both parties are being more or less, at least, honest about their beliefs here. I don't think bogomilism actually has an anti-vaccine stance, and the extent to which Agege had to invent tenuous connections in his complaint backs me up on that. He can't have the vaccine, for example, because his body is a temple, and temples can't take vaccines. But I don't doubt that he sincerely believes he doesn't want to take the vaccine and sincerely believes his religion grants him that right. And I don't doubt that the college is acting largely in accordance with their religious beliefs and insisting that he does. But that won't always be the case, and the courts, by their own admission, can't really distinguish when it is. They can't actually gauge the sincerity of one's beliefs, so they can only take a person's word for it. Sure, they can consider their behavior before and after, but they generally don't, right? Like, there's no way in hell that this case is going to hinge on the fact that, like, Agege got other vaccines previously. none of the vaccine exemption cases that I'm aware of have ever taken that shit into account. So look for a lot more of this shit in the future. Look for religious plaintiffs and defendants dueling with their get out of jail free cards one against the other, and look for an ever expanding list of beliefs that religious people sincerely hold. As it stands, there's an unlimited exemption to the law on the books, and I promise you that it will keep expanding until it explodes.